Every police department really tells two different stories. The first one, that's the official report. It's all handshakes, positive stats, community events. But then there's the other story, the one that's written in lawsuits, in city audits, and in federal investigations. Today, we're going to put those two stories for the El Paso Police Department right next to each other, and we're going to see where they line up and where they just completely fall apart.
So this is El Paso, Texas. And just like any other city, its police department works really hard to craft its official narrative. So let's start there. Let's start with the story the El Paso Police Department, or the EPPD, wants us to see, the image it projects to the very community it's sworn to protect and serve.
And where do you find that official story? Well, there's no better place to look than in their own words. We're diving into the EPPD's 2020 annual report. I mean, this is their public face, right? It's their highlight reel, their big chance to tell everyone about their successes and to find what their mission is all about.
Now remember, 2020 was a test for everybody, and this report really positions the EPPD as being right there on the front lines. These aren't just random photos, they're very carefully chosen symbols. They're meant to show dedication, calm, and professionalism, all during a massive crisis. This is the image they want us to have in our heads. And the numbers they present here are designed to be impressive. The report paints a picture of a department that's modern and really responsive. You see a crisis intervention team handling over 1,400 mental health calls, a huge 30% jump in answered calls, and they pulled in over $14 million in grant money. The portrait they're painting is one of a capable, well-funded, and community-first organization. And here's how they frame accountability. The report makes a point to show that out of 199 use of force incidents that their own Internal Affairs Division investigated, only 29 of them actually led to discipline. The message they want you to get is pretty clear. We police ourselves, use of force is actually rare, and when there is a problem, we deal with it. Okay, so on paper, that's a pretty compelling story, right? But is it the whole picture? I mean, really? This is where we make the pivot. We're going to step away from the official report and look at the public record. Let's start peeling back some of these layers and see what's really been going on behind the press releases. Because you know what? When you start to dig past that glossy report, you find a deep, troubling history of scandal. And we're not just talking about a few bad apples here, we're talking about a pattern that points to something rotten at the core. This is where that official story really starts to crack. And this is not a recent thing. We're going back more than a decade ago when an FBI sting, get this, called Operation Poison Ponds, uncovered widespread public corruption. Just a few years after that, EPPD officers were busted for a fraudulent overtime scheme. And even after all that, a city audit found the department still couldn't manage its grant money correctly. This isn't a series of mistakes. It's a clear pattern of mismanagement and a serious lack of oversight. But the problems go way beyond just mismanaging money. And this is so important because a system that allows that kind of financial stuff to happen, it rarely ever stops there. It seems that exact same lack of accountability has allowed a deeply, deeply troubling culture to grow inside the department, especially for its female officers. So in 2020, just 14% of the El Paso police force was female. Now, on its own, that number's pretty low. But when you start to look at the kinds of allegations that have been coming from inside the department, that number starts to look less like a statistic and a lot more like a warning sign. Just listen to this quote. It's from a journalist summarizing a 7-month investigation. Chocked full of misogyny and sexual harassment. I mean, that is an absolutely damning statement. It suggests the low number of women on the force isn't just a coincidence, but maybe it's a symptom of an environment that is allegedly just toxic for them. And these aren't old stories from a decade ago. These shocking allegations came out in 2023. We're talking about an officer secretly filming a female colleague and then sharing the video, a lieutenant accused of sexual assault and blackmail against 2 female officers, and a sergeant who allegedly knew what was going on and told one of the victims to just go along with it. This is the alleged reality that's hiding behind that 14% statistic.
So what have we seen so far? A documented history of financial problems and really serious allegations about the internal culture. So what happens when that culture spills out onto the street and interacts with the public? Well, let's take a look at what the record says about their use of force.
Wow, this chart just illustrates the disconnect perfectly. Between 2018 and 2023, citizens filed almost 700 use of force complaints against EPPD officers. But the department itself, their own investigations found only 35 of those to be true. Let that sink in. The public is reporting a problem nearly 700 times, and the department only agrees about 5% of the time. So, who's telling the truth here? And It's so critical to remember that these complaints aren't just pieces of paper. This is the case of Xavier Hernandez. His family filed a federal lawsuit. They allege that during a mental health crisis, the exact kind of call the annual report was celebrating, officers restrained him face down until he suffocated and died. The lawsuit claims his death was a direct result of excessive force, a tragic outcome of a systemic problem. All of this, it funnels down to one central question, doesn't it? Accountability. When things go wrong, whether it's with money, with the internal culture, or out on the street, what systems are actually in place to make sure there's justice and to force some kind of real change?
Right, so here's the crucial point. How do these incidents even get investigated? The EPPD uses an internal accountability review board. It's appointed by the department and it's managed by the department. Now, critics like the ACLU look at that and basically say that's the fox guarding the henhouse. They argue for a completely independent body, totally outside the police chain of command, to ensure investigations are actually impartial.
And then you have to layer the police union contract on top of that. Civil rights advocates argue this thing basically builds a fortress around officers, making real accountability almost impossible. Complaints can just expire after 180 days, misconduct records are hidden from public view, and officers can't even be questioned right away after a critical incident. Critics say it's a system that's designed to protect, not to scrutinize.
Which brings us right back to where we started. On one hand, you have the official story from the annual report, professional, responsive, and accountable. And on the other hand, you have the public record, a pattern of corruption, allegations of a toxic culture, and a system that makes independent oversight incredibly difficult. And it leaves us with one final critical question to think about. If a department gets to investigate itself, who is really holding it accountable?